Walking Word podcast. And before I left today, I thought I would tell a pretty cool story, I think, of something that happened to me. It's the only time it's ever happened, but I was in my 20s and I had gotten the X strain of the flu that went untreated and it turned into pneumonia. And we didn't know any of this. My wife and I just thought I was sick and whatever the case was, but it was just kind of like a mild sickness. Turned into something much more severe. And we went to the hospital. They had put the pulse oximeter on my finger to test my oxygen saturation levels. They were in the 70s. And they thought the machine was broken because I had walked in on my own, slowly, but I walked in on my own, and I was conscious and coherent. And so they went and got another pulse oximeter, put it on my finger, still in the 70s. And that's when they realized something was terribly, terribly wrong. And I get rushed into a room. All of a sudden, x-ray machines are in there, doctors are in there, and they're asking my wife, what happened? Like, did he get into an accident? He has a collapsed lung. What's going on? Because my levels were so low. And she was shocked. I was shocked. Next thing I know, it's 3 days later, I had apparently gone into a coma of sorts and went into the intensive care unit and didn't wake up for 3 days. So upon waking up, I realized what had happened and how severe everything was. And mind you, at the time, I was in the middle of doing full contact fights and karate fights, and I was doing Muay Thai and kickboxing fights, and I was in my 20s and strong and, able to take on the world. And I could barely walk once we got to the progressive care unit, and going from the bed to the bathroom, I'd almost pass out because I would almost lose consciousness, and sometimes would. And luckily my wife Candace was there to help me the whole way through. But it was this thing of me being so disheartened and so upset because I was in such good shape. And I realized sitting in that bed in the progressive care unit, just how long it was going to take to recover. So I was really, really sad, and I was really discouraged, and I was mentally not in a good place. Physically, I was in a horrible place. It took me a year to recover from that, by the way, and I'd lost about 20 pounds in 2 weeks. I was just rail thin by the time I had gotten out of the hospital. But I want to tell you about this one thing that happened. So I'm sitting in bed. Candace had gone to get me some food, and I had just been so sullen because I just remember thinking I was in such good shape, and remember thinking how long it was going to take to recover and just how bad everything was. So I'm in a pretty bad space, mentally and physically. And this nurse comes in, sits down on my bed. It's a nurse that I hadn't seen before, and I'd seen tons of them because they were constantly coming in to draw blood and do levels and to, give me medicine and all that stuff. She comes and sits down, and it was this older nurse, short-cut hair. I still remember her haircut, the color of her scrubs. There were this really pretty print blue scrub thing. And she sits down and she asks me, what's wrong? And I begin to tell her how distraught I was and just how discouraged I was, because it was just like, oh man, I'm just, it just seems like it's going to take so long to recover. And she started to just have a conversation with me about how everything was going to be okay. But there was a weight to her words that just fed my soul. There was a significance, there was something to what she was saying. And again, she wasn't telling me scripture or telling me anything that was just revelatory. She was just having a conversation with me. And in that conversation, I was so encouraged. I was so feeling like, you know what, I will get through this and it's going to be okay. And her words just were like a water for my soul almost. It was just really interesting. Well, we have our conversation, doesn't last too long, and then she gets up to leave. Well, as she's leaving, Candace comes in. So they pass each other in the door. And Candace sees that my countenance is a little bit better, and she asks, what happened? You seem to be a little bit better. And I tell her, oh, that nurse that just, was here, she was just so encouraging. And she asked me, what nurse? And I'm like, the nurse that just walked by you. Y'all were in the room at the same time. Y'all were like, y'all were in the door at the same time. Candace had food in her hand. So as she was coming in, it was real interesting because she was real careful to not hit the lady and knock the food over because, bedroom, hospital doors are big enough for beds to come through. So it's big enough for two people to walk by each other. And Candace was telling me that she didn't see anybody. She didn't walk by anybody. There was nobody that had come out. And I'm just like, I don't understand because I watched y'all walk by each other. I watched, she was in the room while you were coming in the room. She was exiting the room while you were coming in the room. And Candace I don't know who you're talking about. And so then we went and asked the nurses, the charge nurse, the nurses at the station. Nobody could recognize the description that I told her. The nurses there, nobody could recognize who this lady was that I was saying was there. And so I end up really what I think in scripture talks about, certain things, be aware that you may be entertaining angels unaware. And I really do see that as the only time I can probably say, the only time that I know of where I think I entertained an angel, where I talked to an angel, those ministering spirits that the scripture talks about, because her words were so good. There was a weight to them. There was a life to them that that was just different. And so it was so significant to me. And again, Candace didn't see her, but they were in the room at the same time. Candace didn't recognize anybody walking by her, although I saw them walk by each other. The charge nurse and the other nurses didn't recognize anybody by that description, nor had anybody come down from another floor, they said, and done any kind of rounds in the rooms. So by all accounts, I had a conversation with an angel or a ministering spirit of some sort, and it was so encouraging and it was awesome. So just wanted to, tell you that story. Hey, maybe you've entertained angels unaware. Who knows? But I would be willing to bet my whole paycheck on the fact that that was an angel come to minister to me and to give me courage and encouragement and peace while I was in this really bad place. So hopefully that's a cool story for you. And maybe you've had another story like that you'd like to tell. God bless and hope this was encouraging for you.